Okay, so let's jump right in. We're about to explore an ancient letter, the book of Galatians. But I want you to forget any ideas about a stuffy philosophical text. Think of this more like an emergency intervention. It's a passionate, urgent, almost breathless letter written to a community in total crisis, a community that the author believed was literally on the brink of abandoning the very core of their faith. Right out of the gate, the author, the Apostle Paul, doesn't waste a single second on pleasantries. He doesn't even say hello. He just opens with pure, unfiltered shock. You can feel the urgency in these words. He's astonished. He's baffled that these believers are just walking away from the message he taught them. This sets the tone for the entire letter. Something has gone terribly, terribly wrong here. And that right there is the central question we're going to unpack. What on earth could make Paul this upset? What was this so-called different gospel they were turning to? And why did he view it as a complete and utter betrayal of his message? Answering this question gets us right to the heart of the conflict in Galatia. So, to really get a handle on Paul's reaction, we first have to understand the battle of ideas that was basically tearing this community in two. They were caught in this tug of war between two completely different understandings of what it even meant to follow Christ. So here's the breakdown. On one side, you've got Paul's gospel, and gospel literally means good news. His message was that salvation is a free gift, something you receive simply by having faith in Jesus, period. But then, these other teachers came along with a different message. They said, yeah, faith is great, but to be truly right with God, you also have to follow the law, the ancient Jewish commandments, especially the big one, circumcision. Now, you can see the appeal, right? It gives you a clear checklist, but Paul saw this as a disaster. It wasn't an addition to the gospel, it was a negation of it. It turned a free gift into something you had to earn, swapping total freedom for bondage. All right, so before Paul can even start to dismantle this other gospel, he has to build his own case. He needs the Galatians to remember exactly why they should be listening to him and not these other guys. And he makes a very simple, incredibly bold claim. His message didn't come from any human. This right here, this is his core argument. Paul is saying his authority isn't based on being taught by the other apostles back in Jerusalem or being part of some official institution. Nope. He insists he got the message directly from the source, a divine revelation from Jesus Christ himself. This makes his gospel totally independent and, in his mind, unchangeable by any human teacher.
In this timeline, it just brilliantly illustrates his independence. He basically lays out his resume, not to brag, but to prove his point. He reminds them, hey, remember me? I was the one who violently persecuted the church. Then, after his revelation, notice what he doesn't do. He doesn't run off to Jerusalem to get trained by the establishment. He goes off on his own, to Arabia. It was years before he even met the other leaders. And when he finally did, he says they added nothing to the message he was already preaching. His gospel was complete from day one.
Okay, so his authority is firmly established. Now Paul pivots. He's ready to tackle the central theological problem head-on. And to do it, he uses a dramatic, real-life story to make his case crystal clear. I mean, get this. This is an absolutely incredible moment. Peter, the leader of the apostles, comes to this city called Antioch. At first, he's totally fine eating with non-Jewish believers. But then, when a group of more conservative Jewish Christians shows up, Peter gets nervous and backs away, separating himself. Paul sees this as total hypocrisy. It's acting like the old laws still build a wall between people, and he confronts Peter, publicly, to his face, for not acting in line with the truth of the gospel. And this public showdown leads Paul to explain the one key concept at the center of this whole mess: justification. Now, it sounds like a big, fancy theological word, but it's really just about one simple question. How does a person get made right with God? The other teachers said, by faith plus obeying the law. Paul's answer is like a thunderclap. By observing the law, no one will be justified. It happened, he says, only through faith. And to prove his point, Paul pulls out his trump card. He reaches way, way back in Jewish history, centuries before the law was ever given to Moses. He points to Abraham, the father of the entire faith, and he asks, how was Abraham made right with God? The ancient scriptures say he believed God and it was credited to him as righteousness. It was his faith, his belief, not his works. For Paul, this is the ultimate precedent. Case closed. Now, you might be thinking, this is all just abstract theology.
But for Paul, this argument has massive, real-world, practical implications for how you actually live your life day in and day out.
So Paul presents the Galatians with this really stark choice. He says trying to live by the law to earn your salvation is like willingly putting a yoke of slavery back on your neck. But trusting in Christ, that brings true freedom. And what do you do with that freedom? He says you don't use it to indulge yourself. No, you use it to serve one another in love. Real freedom always leads to love. Then he paints a pretty grim picture of what life looks like when it's not guided by this freedom in God's Spirit. He calls these the acts of the sinful nature, and it's basically a list of everything that destroys relationships and rips communities apart. Things like discord, jealousy, factions, and envy. But then, in this beautiful, powerful contrast, he shows the alternative. A life lived by faith, a life led by the Spirit, well, it produces a totally different kind of harvest. He famously calls it the fruit of the Spirit. And just look at this list. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. These are all the things that build a community up instead of tearing it down. So, after all of this, after the passionate arguments, the deep theology, and the practical advice, Paul brings it all home. He boils his entire urgent message down to a few incredibly powerful, memorable statements about what really matters in the end. And here it is, the one single issue that was splitting the church in half, circumcision, that external marker of identity. He just waves it away. He says it has no value. It doesn't matter. So what does matter? One thing, faith. And not some dead intellectual faith, but a faith that is alive, that is active, a faith that works itself out through love. And just in case they didn't get it, he says it again right near the very end of the letter, but this time he makes it even stronger. Forget the external labels. Forget the religious rituals that divide people. Whether you're circumcised or not means nothing. The only thing that counts, the ultimate goal, is becoming a new creation. It's all about a radical internal transformation. You know, Paul was fighting against the specific rules and divisions of his day. But that final point, it pushes way beyond that. And it kind of leaves us with a question for our own time, doesn't it? In a world that is still so full of religious rules, social labels, and cultural divisions, what does it actually mean to be a new creation that can rise above all of that?